Broadcasting live from New York City, Simon Jacobson here. Welcome. The topic being externals, how personal style is spiritually empowering. So any of you who have ever been to this class or heard this class online or know the themes that I talk about, it's usually about internals, not about externals. There's an expression, al tabet al merehu. Do not look at his externals as his appearance, because we live in a materialistic world. We live in a world where people worship looks, appearances, to the point that cynics on Madison Avenue or other avenues say, it doesn't matter what happened, it matters what people think happened. It doesn't matter what it is, it matters what it appears like. And appearances, a billion, multi-billion dollar industry of cosmetics just to somewhat cover up on our blemishes and just maintain the look of youth, of vibrancy, and so on. So things can be deteriorated and rotten right beneath the surface or a little deeper or ugly, but it looks good. Packaging. So we live in a world where sizzle is far more important than the steak. I can go on with the cliches. You get the idea. And that's what we're told. Don't succumb to the seduction of our senses, which is the externals. And remember, you want to look at somebody, look at their personality, look at their values, look at their soul, look at their inner self. And it's the basis really of all healthy relationships, of all healthy interactions, and also how to look at ourselves. Something happens to you, it's not so pleasant. There's always a deeper story. Things that may appear sometimes challenging, even pain, suffering. Look beneath the surface. Don't live a surface life. So based on that premise, and I can go on and on, I've done that for 30 years, one would seem that externals actually have no significance at all. Externals are just a distraction. And what we need to do is to get beyond it and get beyond the surface level and look what's within, in ourselves, in others, in the world, science. You don't look at the outside, you look at what makes things tick. So the question at the table is this: is this true? Do externals have absolutely no role to play? In other words, if we find something beautiful in appearance, is that meaningless? Is something aesthetically pleasant, is that insignificant? Is outer beauty, as we say in the Eshet Chayil, which we say every Friday night from the last chapter in Proverbs, Mishlei, it says, Sheker hachen vehevel hayofi, that grace is false, and beauty is empty or vain or hollow. And the only thing one should look at is Ki'im Isha Yiras Hashem, a woman of valor, a woman that is, who do you praise? A woman that is God-fearing. So from that verse, and as it is with many other verses, it appears that yes, exactly that, appearances and outside beauty is actually a distraction and is hollow and vain. But on the other hand, and that of course is what we're going to be discussing, it's not really so. Because you find in the Torah, the same Torah that talks about the power of the soul and the beauty that's within, also talks beauty without. You have the compliment given to all the matriarchs, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, that they were beautiful. Yifas Te'er, Yifas Mara, and it doesn't just mean personality. Because you're talking about their look. Mara, Yifas Mara is an appearance. That means to the physical eye, they look beautiful. And we see Pharaoh and Avshalom and others were attracted to them. Obviously, they had inner beauty and spiritual beauty, but also Yifas Te'er, Yifas Mara. Yifas Te'er means the structure, their physique. You can say their structure was beautiful and also their look was beautiful. And it's not the only case. You find it also throughout the Torah in many places talk about, for example, when talks about the priests in the temple and the garments that were made, lekoved u'leseferes, that it should be honorable and beautiful clothing and garments. Because when you serve God, especially in a holy temple, things should be beautiful. And you go on and on. There's a verse in the book, in the Oz Yasher, a verse in the song that we say every day that was sang by the Jews after they left Egypt, after the parting of the sea. Zeh keli v'anveyu. This is my God, and I beautify him. And the Talmud goes on to say that when we do a mitzvah, we derive from this verse, Beautify your mitzvahs. It shouldn't just be a regular mezuzah, a beautiful mezuzah. It shouldn't just be a nice Sefer Torah scroll. It should be a beautiful one. It shouldn't just be nice, different. Even mitzvahs should have a certain external beauty to them, because beauty does matter. And then, of course, we all know the esrog, which is not even mentioned in the Torah, the fourth of Sukkos, when we take the four species. It doesn't even say the word esrog. We have to derive it from all kinds of. Rambam talks about where do we find out it's an esrog. The Torah uses actually a very beautiful term. It says pri eitz hadar, a beautiful fruit of the tree. Now there are many beautiful fruit, so this is not the place here. Next Sukkos we'll talk about it. But the Rambam talks, Maimonides explains that we makabel Kabbalah Moshe, the halacha Moshe Messinai, that we accept that it was received from generation to generation, that it meant an esrog, which we know can be esrogim that are actually not so beautiful, and people go and search for the most beautiful one in shape, in form, in look, because the word hadar, pri eitz hadar, doesn't just say a fruit of the tree, but hadar. Hadar includes the word beauty, and on and on. Yes, just to add a little more to it. I'm not trying to make this not a legal case for beauty, but nevertheless, it's good to establish it. And then, of course, we have this seeming contradiction. You have, even in the spheres, in the 10 spheres, there's one sphere dedicated, it's called Tiferet. Tiferes, in Hebrew, one of the meanings is beauty. Tiferes, we say beauty. So, even though it also means compassion, and it has other significance, but the word beauty is not an ugly word in Judaism or in Torah. So even though it's true that the internal is the key, and that's what you want don't want to have an ugly inside and a beautiful outside, but externals is not insignificant. And that's where the Torah does make a fuss and does emphasize you should have a beautiful life. You should have a beautiful home. There's a concept of dira na, isha na, a beautiful woman, a beautiful home, and other places where it constantly refers to it as a quality, besides what I've mentioned already, the priestly garments, as well as the temple itself. The temple itself was a beautiful structure, and was with the best of gold, silver, and copper, and all the other materials that was used first in the portable sanctuary that they traveled with in the wilderness, and then the permanent temple that was built in Jerusalem. Jerusalem itself is a beautiful city. So to suggest that Bid'ah only lies within is absolutely incorrect. And so I'll be focusing on that, on the externals. As I said, the internal is a given. Obviously, a soul is the most important thing. But the question is, what is the role of the externals? And to pose it in a question form, why is it then, since the internal is so significant, why does the Torah put such emphasis on outer beauty as well? And the answer is, and that's what we'll be discussing, the short answer is, because beauty is beauty no matter what, whether it's external. The fact that we are attracted to certain things that are beautiful, and the word beauty itself, if you Google it, you start looking, you'll see no one really has a definition what is beautiful, because we know beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. It's true there are some objective features that many people will agree are beautiful, but beauty is really a very subjective term. And even if many of us are attracted to something, whatever, it's a beautiful sunset or a beautiful person or a beautiful painting or any other form of beauty, to someone say to you, can you tell me exactly why you find that beautiful and not this beautiful? Very hard to quantify. But the fact is, our eyes are attracted to certain things. And when you say beauty, I shouldn't just say visual. There's also, obviously, you can hear beautiful music. Not see it, but sense it, experience it. So beauty is more than just a visual thing, even though when you say external, when you listen to music, it's not really something that is an external. You're already listening to something that's a little deeper. But regardless, the fact of the matter that we were created as people who do have preferences and tastes, and there are things that we're attracted to and things we're not attracted to, is not dismissed at all. It'd be dismissed if we become only superficial, and the only thing we value are externals. Like I said, people can value something externally, and then underneath the surface, the thing is a thing that's completely ugly. That's even been, sometimes you have situations where somebody was able to transform an ugly thing to look beautiful, and then you find out, most of us don't feel so good about that, because we see right away it's fake. So obviously we're not talking about one without the other. But to say that it doesn't have any significance is incorrect. But we're going to discuss this a little deeper, obviously, especially since the Torah does emphasize that mitzvah should be done in a beautiful manner, also a physical manner. So let's start with the most basic element of beauty, which is not just a physical face or a physical body or a physical anything, but also a beauty as a personality. You know, we're attracted to people who are pleasant, who give off a good vibe. Yep, they're physically beautiful as well. What does that mean? Because we are people with discretion. We were blessed with a mind and a heart. And when something seems in place, and beauty is like a certain thing that seems in place, we're drawn to it. Something that's grotesque or is repulsive. Now, not to go and I'm not going to try to give one definition of beauty, but the definition of beauty in Jewish thought, like going back to the sphere, Tiferet, is, the best word I can use for it is harmony. Harmony. And if you think about it, it's harmonious things that attract us. Let's talk about a face. What makes a beautiful face? So if you look around, you'll see the scientists, they all give their different versions. It's not just the eyes, it's not just the nose, it's not just the mouth, it's not just the complexion, or the forehead, or the hair. You know, I'm talking about pure face. You'll always see it's a combination. There's a certain symmetry between those that give off a beautiful. For example, you can have someone with beautiful eyes, but if it's not proportionate with other parts of their face, something it like, you know, will be, it won't resonate with us. So it's not a particular feature. Yeah, you could say someone has beautiful eyes, but it's also set in a beautiful face. So there's always going to be an element what we'll call harmony within diversity. Like, for example, you'd say the color blue is beautiful. You wouldn't really use the word beautiful. You'd say, I want to see how the color blue is used. If it's mixed, it's used in a particular context, it becomes beautiful because it's one color. Just like you wouldn't say one musical note is beautiful. Beauty is always going to consist of several things, an amalgamation of several components placed in a harmonious way. Take the same components and reverse their order, and it can become complete chaos. Take music, beautiful music, the harmony of music is a flow. It's a flow. And you feel, let's say somebody decides, let's move around the musical notes a bit. What is it going to sound like? It's going to be grating to the ear. Because what's lacking is the harmony. You still have the diversity, but it's not in the right order. Let's say, you know, people who speak well, a good speech, or a good writer, author. And you read an author, you know, you can see right away it's good because it flows. You don't have to, you know, you feel like you're part of the story, you feel absorbed by it, you feel engaged. You could have someone write exactly the same story. You could have someone write exactly the same story, and if they word it a little differently, or they're not good with vocabulary, and it becomes, you'll say the story is a good one, but it's not, the presentation is not a good one. And that becomes a real thing. You know, you see this all the time. And I train some speakers, and I hear some speakers, brilliant ideas. But often what's lacking, they don't put A before B and B before C. So you can have a situation where someone says all the good ideas, but they say B before A, if you know what I'm saying. So the ideas are there, but you're like, confuses you because, like, one second, the order is in the wrong place. So you'll see that there are great speakers who may not have such great content, but they are poetic in the sense they know how to order it in the right way. And someone else doesn't know how to order it in the right way. So you see from that beauty isn't always the components themselves, it's how you configure them and how you place them in an eloquent order. And when you do that, it changes the whole picture. So, not, as I said, I don't want to quantify because beauty is at the end of the day in the eyes of the beholder, and it's quite subjective. But if you were able to break it down, something you're attracted, you'll see it's going to have some symmetry, some harmony of the pieces in the right place. It's like almost like, you know, just like they say nature abhors chaos, we too. You know, like we want order. Everybody, we like order. What is order? You know, if it's in your desk, your office, at home, you know, when everything is everywhere, it's not order. Now, I just have to qualify this because just to give an example, my father's desk, I remember, was a desk with papers that went all the way up to here. So you'd think he'd walk in, no way, this is order. But in his mind, there was order. And I said to him, can you tell me, how do you find a paper, a document that you put in there like a year ago. He says, tell me, what are you looking for? So I came up with something, and he knew exactly where it was. He pulled it right out. I mean, it took him a minute, 30 seconds. So, so everybody has their standards of order. Other people, the desk is completely empty. Like they teach you, they teach executives, empty desk, do one thing at a time. Some people are really masters at that. And then, of course, there's the joke where you have the guy, has like a sign on his desk. It says, if a cluttered desk is the sign of a cluttered mind, what is an empty desk a sign of? An empty mind. That's what it's meant to be. Now, obviously, that's not true, but it's a nice joke. So, order is something we also are drawn to. Look at children, even youngest age. I mean, youngest in the place where they have the capacity. You give them, those toys where you match different objects, different shapes into, like the whole, fit the circle into the circle, and fit a square into a square. You'll see there's a certain gravitation to make order. Like you see a triangle, you want to put it where the triangle is. You circle, a circle. So there's an innate element in us that is drawn even to physical beauty. And we'll soon get to the dichotomy I was talking about. Physical beauty, because there's a symmetry to it. And symmetry is what it's natural to us. Now, philosophers don't really know why. Why shouldn't chaos be natural to us? Especially if you could take an evolutionary take on the universe, that there's no design and there's no intelligence. We could have easily evolved to like chaos instead of liking order. So this remains one of the axioms that science just accepts. That's how it is. In Jewish thought, and Jewish mysticism particularly, it's not at all that. It's because everything begins with a singularity, God, Shem Echad, a oneness. So even though the oneness will manifest in many different dimensions, which is the diversity of the universe, but the oneness remains that singular force that connects things. And that is what we gravitate to. We don't like fragmentation. We don't like things that are chaotic. We don't like things that are out of order. We don't like things that are scattered. We always look to find things that connect, the connectors. So from a Jewish mystical point of view, the reason is very simple. We're in search for unity. I remember I once said this actually at a science conference, and I said it without any religious connotations or religious undertones. Spoke about it more, and I said, science is a search for unity. And and every scientist will tell you absolutely, that here we have millions and billions of phenomena out there, and scientists have been looking all the time to find rules that explain many phenomena. To the point that Einstein's holy grail, and physics' holy grail, was the search for the unified field theory. The one theory that would explain electromagnetism and gravity and the strong force and the weak nuclear force, etc. And they've not yet found it. But we do have basic principles that are far more uniting than it was ever in history. And if you think about it, think of technology. If you were to define technology in one word, what would it be? It would be unity. Technology connects, whether it's communications, whether it's transportation, whether it's things like internet, that time and space separates us, and technology connects us on every possible level. Even medical breakthroughs, if you think about it, what's the day a medical breakthrough in general terms? That here we have disease or infection, things that can hurt us, can break us down, and can so-called separate the life force from the body, and a medical miracle or medical intervention reconnects and makes sure that the flow of life continues inside the body and fights the infection or the disease or eliminates it in the first place or prevents it, etc., etc. So unity, if you think of it in the broad sense of the word, is really the symmetry that things are working, things are in place. You have a machine, you want that machine to what do they say, to be fluid, to the word express, sound like a fiddle. There's an expression. Anyway, whatever the expression is. Every week we have the vocabulary of the week. Smooth like a fiddle, that's what it's saying. Completely smooth. And we look for that. And there's something about it that attracts us. When you see somebody that is able to connect things and make order, it's very powerful. And even let's talk psychologically. Psychologically, people have many voices inside us. You have the voice of temptation. You have the voice that wants instant gratification. This is seducing you, that's seducing you. You have voices, dark voices, demons, fears, inhibitions. And then you have, of course, good voices. And you come and say to yourself, what's the matter with me? Why can't I just be a consistent human being? Why one day like this, one day like that? I can't be at peace. What is ultimately good and good intervention psychologically? You help people to reintegrate their lives, to create some seamlessness. Instead of having these conflicting voices and conflicting drives, somewhat find peace and balance. Without eliminating, obviously you want to eliminate anything that's negative, but without annihilating the person, create some balance where you can see your life in context of, I'll use the example I always use when we talk about finding your personal mission statement. You need a mission, just like a business needs a mission statement, and that connects and unites all your fragmented activities. Take away that unifying mission statement, your life is then dragged and splintered and fragmented in every possible way. You're traveling on the journey of life. You have no GPS, you have no rudder, you have no compass. One day you go here, one day you go there. I always make that suggestion at the end of the day, list everything you did today. Everything, from the moment you woke up to the moment you're going to go to sleep. You'll find 100, 150 items, and you'll try to connect the thread to them. Most things have no connection. You know, you're showering in the morning. What connection does it have to having a coffee break late in the afternoon, for example? So you have a whole bunch of these fragments. When someone can find a thread that connects them, there's a certain calm, yeah, that's a good word, that settles in because you see how things belong instead of what am I going to do tomorrow? Is this a priority? Is that a priority? Now, I know I do this every week and I'm not bashful to do it. Children are always our best model. Look at children and you'll see seamlessness. Until, of course, screwed up adults screw up the children. I have no better way to put it. I'm sure there are better ways to put it, but that's how it came out. So what do you have? You have children seamless. They don't have these anxieties of this voice, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or maybe I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and this thing, and this one's expecting that, and that one's expecting this. And I have this to do, and this deadline and that deadline. There's a seamlessness. There's a certain, and that's why they're so beautiful. I'm not even getting to the physical cuteness of a child. They're just beautiful in the way they just like fish in water, active and explore. Sometimes they can make you crazy where you have to run after them, all that. But that's more of you want to make sure they don't get into trouble. But there's a certain beauty to their free abandon. And then you start saying to yourself, I was once like that. What happened to me? Now everything is cautious and I'm second guessing myself, and I'm not. You don't have the whole that fluidity, that movement. And if you think about it, everything in life, as I said, whether it's a musician playing a beautiful composition on piano or violin or whatever it may be, what do you really see? You see that again, the harmony, the fluidity, the seamlessness, but it's not one step. You see the flow. You ever see these great swimmers? What's so beautiful? It's like, almost no splash. It's like this literally, again, they become almost like one with the water. And this is true with everything, whether you're in the zone writing or speaking or teaching or art or music or dance. Again, it's always this fluidity, like almost like you and the object and the subject become melted into one. And what grates on our nerves? When there is no fluidity, when things are collide into each other, and it's cumbersome and it's awkward. So beauty in that sense is, going back to the definition, harmony within diversity. And why is it that way? Because, as I said, there is a unifying field principle, a unifying force, a singularity beneath the surface of everything in existence. So we're sitting in a room here, there are chairs, there are tables, there are people, technology, all kinds of stuff. There's a man praying to God. Everything is here. And we have right? Now you could see a bunch of different scattered things. So no, what we're taught is that if you connect to the inner force behind it all, there's something that connects it all. And if you talk to physics, a physicist says exactly, whether they call it string theory, or they call it underlying unity, or they call it a quilt, the invisible quilt that connects all the details, there is a unity. And when you can connect to that, then there's a certain peace, because you realize that the diversity of existence is really just all expressions of one unifying force. And we call it, in the most famous prayer of all, Hashem Echad, the Shema. That Echad is not a small matter. So till let's say 100, 200 years ago, where unity was not such a dominant word in secular language. Today, unity is a big thing. To be united. United States of America. It's technology, the unity, the search of the unified field theory. The Jewish people, or the Torah, has been emphasizing unity from the beginning of time. That's what Abraham was looking for, the one God. He wasn't interested in a million gods, for every mood, another God. He was looking for the singularity, the thing that connects it all. And there's something, when we hear that resonates with everyone. Now, some scientists will say, you know what, I don't need God. My unity goes back to the Big Bang. Okay, call it whatever you want to call it, but there's still a unity. Okay, so maybe it's a safe, a politically correct way, instead of saying God, say the unity of it all, you know. Some call it nature. Now, to get back to our theme here, this is an important introduction, because this really tells us that it's unity that is valuable. Now, this unity can be internal and it can be external. The fact that something physically is beautiful is an indicator that in some way, either God created it that way, or human beings made it that way. It carries a symmetry that resonates with us. And yes, we will be drawn to it. Where the problems begin, and we'll talk about that shortly, is when that gets separate from the inside. When the outer beauty or the outer attraction gets divorced from the inner attraction. And then, who knows what could happen. But the mere fact that we're drawn to something beautiful is actually a very holy and very sacred thing. It means you're drawn to a symmetry and a unity, which essentially is godly. So beauty essentially is a manifestation of godliness in this world. Or if you want to call it unity, if the word godliness is too intense. So it's about seeing something that fits, that works. Now, I know a skeptic could say, one second here. You know, we are used to each other. When we see a beautiful human face, is because we have a certain standard. Maybe if you went to another planet, what would be grotesque for us would be beautiful for them. You have this in the science fiction movies and Star Treks and so on, that, you know, societies where something is completely ugly. I remember, where was it? I think it was on a plane with our family flying, and somebody was watching Star Trek, and then one of these aliens, you know, that like had ears coming out of here, and the skin was all, you know, a weird, we knew it was makeup, but one of the little kids said, so ugly, who is that? You know? And I thought to myself, one second, it's ugly because we're not used to it. If we all look that way, that would be beautiful. And even I think there are even some themes like that in some of the science fiction, where, you know, they see beauty, and so everyone else thinks, that's beautiful, that's like, Right, exactly. Now, that doesn't contradict what I'm saying, because the fact of the matter is, yes, it's true. In certain cultures, what they would call symmetry, another culture may not see as symmetry. That's symmetrical. That's why I said earlier, it is in the eyes of the beholder at the end of the day. You know? Look, animals are drawn to each other, and they show off, and they go through all their antics to attract a mate. You know, whether it's peacocks or everyone has their stuff. And for us, it may not mean anything. I mean, a peacock happens to be beautiful, the colors and so on. But there's certain, you ever see some of these courtship things in the animals is like completely, you wouldn't go for that. If a man made such a move on someone, you'd run the other direction. You know, I'm talking about the human species. Frankly, I think if the animals saw what we do, they may say the same. These guys are nuts. You go to sit in a bar, you come up with some quip. That's the pickup line, you know. Okay, so there is we do know there's a relativity theory always at work, and the relativity theory tells you that it's not going to be, but it's still symmetrical for those in their world. You ask them, and they'll say, yes, that's beautiful, because that works. That's seamless, you know. And in that sense, the definition I was giving is still there. So what I just talked about was really more, I would say, the theory of it all. We have to get now to the practical side of it. The practical side of it goes back to the point I made at the beginning, and that's where we now get into the externals and internals. And what you're going to hear now, I mean, if I may say so, is quite fascinating. Not because it's coming from me, because the way the Torah describes this is just really a fascinating concept. So what do we have when we look around life today? As I mentioned at the outset, the material world, yes, worships externals, to the point that if two people come for a job interview and one looks physically more beautiful than the other, even if the other one's more competent, I mean, obviously if it's gross incompetence, even that may even not even be a factor. Very often, the more beautiful person is going to get the job. And you think to yourself, what does that happen? Why? Because we are superficial people, and something superficial like that will have an effect on us. I was explaining that it's not superficial because beauty does have some power, but the fact that we can make decisions that are weird and absurd based on worshiping something external is a demonstration that there is a serious dichotomy between the inner and the outer. And yes, whether it's a woman or a man, and maybe women are judged more from the external beauty because men are more visual, and women perhaps are not so superficial. It's another discussion. I don't know if that's for tonight, but I just want to mention it. But regardless, the fact of the matter is that a woman or a man, if they can be a beautiful personality, an excellent person, qualities, virtues, kind, compassionate, everything you'd want, but if their physical beauty is somewhat not as beautiful as somebody else, they will probably not get the benefit of the doubt. Now, I'm not going to say this universally. This is absolutely not true across the board. There are people who are found their soulmates and happy people, happy marriages, and the spouse was not, let's put it on, not necessarily the physically most beautiful person they met, but they do connect on an inner level. And, frankly, when you really love someone on the inside, their physical looks also change in your eyes. I'm not talking about change objectively, that someone, that's a light complexion suddenly looks like a dark complexion. But there's the symmetry of their being becomes more attractive. And you see this all the time. It's a weird thing. And, many people, of course, in the early stages of dating, don't think about that. They think, what do I see? They don't think, oh, if I love this person, maybe I'll like them even if they don't look as great as I'd like them to look. Fine. But the point I want to make here is that we live in a dichotomous world. And that's what I want to address now. We addressed the issue of beauty itself. But here's the dichotomy, that an outside look is going to be more powerful than an inside look, basically, for all of us. And look at the marketing. Look at the idea of marketing. What is marketing? The packaging, the presentation. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have good presentations, but you could have a con artist completely manipulate your emotions and sell you something that a real person didn't have such a good pitch and didn't have such a good presentation, and they won't get it. It's another example. And we even get hurt in the process. You bought into the what's it called? The shtick, the stuff, the what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever. I'll just repeat presentation again. I don't like to use the same word in the same sentence twice. Okay, fine. So be it. So we live in this world. You get a phone call. Okay, today, thank God, caller ID, and they more or less screened out most of the telemarketers. Now they actually write telemarketer in the caller ID. I guess some people are attracted to that. I don't know. So you get a guy on the phone. He says to you, okay, they start selling you something. And we all have that inclination. We don't like to say no. We say maybe, call me back tomorrow. We all know just procrastination. And just hang up on the person, Or like some cute people, they say, you know what, I'm busy right now. Can you give me your personal number and I'll call you back? They say, no, this is a business call. So why are you calling me on my personal number? That's one of the, whatever it is, if you want to make someone crazy. But often, I don't know if you've ever taken the bait. It happened to me younger. Now I, avoid the whole thing. And they sell you something, they tell you, and you say, I got to think about it. They say, no, the deal is over in 10 minutes. The offer, look at every television thing. If you call right now in the next 30 seconds, you get 2 for the price of 1. And we don't even know what 1 is like. So you're getting 2 pieces of garbage for the price of 1. Very nice. But they get you into your head. And this is emotional manipulation big time. And hopefully at some point you get burned enough that you don't buy into it. What we call the Jews a shmata, about another shmata. You know what a shmata is? Piece of junk. I'm not saying all these presentations are bad. They say a broken clock is also correct twice a day. So I'm sure there's sometimes something is a good thing. But what do they say? When a man with money meets a man with experience, the man with experience ends up with the money, and the man with the money ends up with the experience. Now, if that happens too many times to you, maybe you should go into a different job, to a different business. The point I want to make is we live in a world, I'm doing it somewhat humorously, but frankly, it's not so humorous in many situations. Think of backstabbers. Think of people who smile to you. Think of people who make believe they're your friend. And when push comes to shove, they can stab you in your back. And they can really mess you up. So it's not always so humorous as I just made it. Sometimes it has real consequences. And sometimes it was a good friend of yours, but then a little money, a little competition, a little ulterior motive, suddenly deep relationships are compromised. I know brothers and sisters don't talk to each other because of a few dollars. I know people who loved each other, really loved each other, and then something happened. And you have this serious dichotomy where the external suddenly becomes more important than the internal. And yes, you can go into a fight over a petty thing that is embarrassing if you think about it objectively. And I hope none of us are guilty of that. But if you are, don't feel alone. Unfortunately, this is part of reality. And that's where the inner and the outer become a conflict. Because then suddenly, so you're worshiping this outer beauty or this outer attraction. I don't just mean beauty, I mean anything that's an outer thing that's drawing you. And you're ready to compromise inner values because of that. Now, on paper, everyone would say, yes, it sounds absurd. But in reality, that's a fact. That happens all the time. Who has not somewhat compromised values and idealism that we may have due to whatever excuse we give? Market pressures, I had no choice, or I'm compromising today, so tomorrow I won't have to compromise. That type of stuff. So how does how do the mystics explain that? And this is what they say. They say that that's exactly the way it was intended. That divine unity I spoke about before, desired, and that's the word used actually, desired, that unity be expressed in a world that is diverse. Remember I said harmony within diversity. But diversity has a risk. And let me put it in the context of the biblical context. You read the story of Genesis, you find like this. On the first day, God created light. It says God created heaven and earth, and day one, Yom Echad, light was created. Okay. Comes day two, God separated the higher waters from the lower waters, the higher heaven to the lower heaven. That was day two. Day three, God created vegetation. Day four, the celestial body, the sun, the moon, and the stars. But I want to focus on the first three, which also comes to explain why is it so significant to know 1, 2, 3, what difference does it make? But this touches upon a very both philosophical and psychological and fundamental principle in all of our lives. We all have a 1, 2, 3 in our lives. 1 is like the number it suggests, unity. So day one, light. What is light? Light unifies. Light illuminates. When you see things, everything is obvious. And that's what the Medrash says. Yom Echad, like Hashem Echad. Echad, oneness, unity. It doesn't say Yom Rishon. It should have said, if Yom Sheni means the second day, the first day should say the first day. It doesn't say the first day, it says day one. Only the other 6 days doesn't say day two. It says the second day, the third day. By day one, it says one because oneness dominated, which is essentially what I was talking earlier about seamlessness. That one is dominated. What happened on day two was actually the creation of two, the separation of higher and lower. So day one, even though there was diversity, but everything was obviously connected. Day two, there was the creation of diversity. Diversity where there was a real separation, a mahavdalah, in the words of Hebrew, a separation between one and another. And here's the interesting thing. Every day of the creation, it says, at the end of the day, God saw what he created, and it was good. Day two is the only exception. It does not say it was good. Day three, interestingly, it says it was double. It says twice it was good. It's called chuchba boiketev, a double good. So what's going on? It was like, you think it's a typo. Maybe they forgot to put that good in day 2 and stuck 2 of them in day 3. No, but it's not a typo. The answer is beautiful, but simple and also profound. Once you create 2, what does that do? On one hand, it can be the most beautiful thing. As I said, harmony within diversity. Now you have diversity, 1 and 2 opinions, so to speak. And now you can create beauty. Because beauty, one color is never beautiful. So 2 allows for the potential of beauty, but there's another side to 2. It also has the potential for conflict. So it says in the Medrash that the second day, day 2, the second day was also the creation of machlekas. Diversity could lead to divisiveness. So diversity is really, essentially, can go 2 directions. Diversity can be connected and leads to a beautiful harmony and beauty, even deeper than the beauty of day 1. Or it can lead to divisiveness and to something that's ugly. Why did God do this? Because that's exactly the purpose of existence. That the Hashem Echad, the unity of the divine, should not remain static, but but there should be a world, a diverse world created, and in that diversity, with the great risk of divisiveness and conflict, that people should be wise enough that not to create conflict, but to create harmony. So if you only have one person on earth, there can be no conflict. There can be no war. And obviously you could have a war with yourself. We know that. But I'm talking about, as soon as there's 2 people, 2 opinions. 2 opinions can be very different opinions. Or you begin to create harmony. When do we know the resolution of this? Not on day 2, on day 3. Because number 3 is the reconciler. 3 is the mediator. 3 is the force that takes 1 and 2 and brings them together and says, you have a quality, let's join them together. Think of it like the conductor of a symphony, the conductor of an orchestra. So everyone's playing their instrument, but you need that one unifying third element that says, you play now, we become harmonious. So if day 1 is chesed, which is just a oneness, love and kindness. Day 2 is gvura, which is separation. And day 3 is teferes, which is harmony, joining 2 opposites. If you think of it in terms of relationships, day 1 would be like a single life. Day 2 is when you're encountering another person, and day 3 is when you learn to join together, and more than the sum of the parts. I find that extremely eloquent way of looking at existence. I know it sounds simple, but really, if you think of it, everything in life is that way. You're either just alone, a loner, or you're interacting with others and causing conflict, or you're interacting and bringing harmony. In a way, that's the story of all of life. Interestingly, the 3 months that we are in now, Nisan, the month of Passover, also corresponds to the month 1. It's called month 1, the first month. This month we're in, which is the refinement of the emotions, is diversity. And the 3rd month, Sivan, which leads the month of Shavuos, Matan Torah, is called Teferes. Teferes is Matan Torah, Zeh Matan Torah, the harmony. So when we grow up, when we're born as children, things are very seamless, as I said, it's very simple. Then you grow into an adult and you start having all these different voices and these different demands and different expectations and all the different conflicts we have. And our goal is to find harmony within those conflicts. Not to allow there to be conflict. Instead of diversity turning into divisiveness, diversity returning into harmony. So now let's take this back to the outer and the inner. So essentially you can say that this existence as we know it was exactly created in that way, that there is a potential that the inner and the outer should not be consistent with one another. And that's what we experience on a daily basis, where you can have something in the outer can be very attractive, but beneath the surface it's not that way at all. You can be drawn to the superficial and forget about the soul, both within yourself and within other people. Look, people pursue money, people pursue possessions, acquisition. And you ask them, what's the point of it all? If I have a lot of money, I can buy anything I want. I can buy happiness. And what happens with all this acquisition? You hoard and you gather and you gather. You don't necessarily become a happier person. You just become someone that has a lot more to carry. And it distracts you. It's like somewhat of a drug. But a person does not find inner focus in life, like, why am I here? And what am I going to use my money for? And what am I going to use my possessions for? Then basically the means of your life take over, and means are always going to be fragmented because they're very different. They have nothing that connects one to the other. So harmony and tiferes and beauty really is understanding that all that you have in life, even the externals, are really an extension of the internal. But the way God wanted it to be, that there be a challenge, that we have outer and inner beauty, and you don't see necessarily the connection. The truth is, the goal is that it should be inner and outer, one seamless flow. An inner beauty that's expressed in an outer fashion. And that's why the Torah makes such emphasis on having a beautiful mezuzah, a beautiful home, beautiful garments, and values beauty. Because it sees beauty not as a separate from inner beauty. It sees it as an extension of it. The temple was the place where God rested in this world. So what should be beautiful, more beautiful? What building on the earth should be more beautiful than the place where God dwells? Your home is your home. That's the place where your beauty, because it's your internal beauty, that's the place where it lives. So it should be externally beauty. Because it doesn't see a separation between outer and inner. We have that separation. But from the true point of view, there is no separation. The reason things are externally beautiful is because they're an extension of internal beauty. Think of it this way. In Hebrew, the word for face, you know the word for face is panim. Panim. The word for face in English, of course, is face. But what's the word for the inner of a person, the inside of a person? You know, when we say in English the face of something, that's the face. On the surface, it appears, ostensibly on the surface. What's the inner? Inner is a different word. Face is the outside, and inside would be, I don't know, what face is the outside would be what's behind the face. You know, in Hebrew, you know what the word for inside is? The same word as the word face. Panim. Panim means a face. It also means panim, the inside. Interesting, right? Because in Hebrew, which is the holy tongue, and Hebrew, which is a language that expresses the way things are meant to be, not just the way things are, it tells you that the inner and the outer are meant to be one seamless flow. There's an expression, echad b'peh, echad b'lev, means that you say one thing with your mouth and you mean something else with your heart. The Indians called the white men, when they met them in the United States, in America, when they first met, Indians met the white men, you know what they called them? They said, white man speaks with forked tongue. That's what they call it. What's a forked tongue? A liar, basically. A fork in the tongue. You say one thing, you mean something else. That's what the Indians would call the white men. I don't know if all white men did it, but I guess some of them did. I don't know, who is it? Desmond Tutu. I don't want to quote him, but he said a funny thing. He said, when the white men came to Cape Town, what was it, the 17th century, was it? They were going their way to India, and then they found this beautiful paradise. So he says, the white men, they brought us the Bible. And they told the blacks in South Africa, listen, close your eyes and put your hand on the Bible and let's pray together. Okay, and that's what we did. He says, when we opened our eyes, we ended up with the Bible, and they ended up with the land. Okay. Right? What do you think about that? So, there's forked tongue, speaking with forked tongue. There is echad b'peh, echad b'lev. Now for us, most of us would say, if someone said duplicity, what do you think about duplicity? So nobody likes the word duplicity. Nobody would like to be called your duplicitous person. However, ask somebody, is duplicity natural to us, or is it innate or acquired? Now, many people say, well, you know, too many people are duplicitous to say it's acquired, because you see so many people can be duplicitous. Well, this is where society is at. Society sees the dichotomy of saying one thing and meaning another, or we'll call it the inside and the outside, as two separate things. That's why on the face of it looks like that. On the surface, it looks like that. But you dig a little deeper, it's very different. You always say that, right? The biggest cliche that nobody believes in is don't judge a book by its cover. Can you tell me somebody that doesn't judge a book by its cover? You know, it's $1 billion industry, covers, not just book covers. Packaging for products, But still they say, don't judge a book by its cover. But everybody judges. You look at a cover, you know how much money they spent at the cover because they want you to buy the book. And the same thing with, I said, other products. We judge things by the cover because we are cover-like people. Comes Hebrew and says, you know something? The truth is the cover is an important thing, but the cover is really just a reflection of the inside. Beauty within will shine into beauty without. And beauty without is a reflection of beauty within. The fact that people can separate the two, that's our problem. That's why in Judaism and Torah it values greatly beauty, because it doesn't look at beauty as an external. It sees beauty as the expression of inner beauty on an external level. In other words, there's an inner beauty. What does inner beauty look like to the physical eye? Very beautiful, aesthetically beautiful, manners, refined, and yes, symmetrical and harmonious on all levels. We are the human beings that are able to do what? Divorce the two and say, oh, I want your beauty. You all know the Portrait of Dorian Gray, the story by Oscar Wilde? Portrait of Dorian Gray. What's the story? Dorian Gray was this very handsome man, and he gets in with bad people, and they start, having fun. Hedonistic lifestyle. The Bash, taking care of their own needs, selfish, without regard of anybody else. But he looks in the mirror once and sees Dorian Gray that, that as he's behaving that way, some of the cruelty is starting to appear on his face. That's what happens. You start getting a wrinkle here, So, of course, one of the characters is the devil, manifest in some other human being, and says to Mr. Gray, Dorian Gray, I'll make a deal with you. For your soul, I will give you eternal youth. That no matter what you do in life will never appear. Your face, you'll always remain that beautiful person the rest of your life, forever. And he makes the deal. Long story short, he makes the deal, and what happens? He gives him a painting. This guy draws a painting of Dorian Gray, and anything that changes doesn't change in the face of the human, it changes in the painting. And they put the painting up in the attic, and Dorian Gray lives a life, you could imagine, a life of total sin, total selfishness, total narcissism, taking advantage of everyone, women, everything he can. And the painting gets more and more grotesque. But he is immune, plastic, nothing affects. As he lives this life, he knows what kind of life he's living, and he wants to. And people who knew who he was die because he keeps living and living, and he knows the only witness remaining is the painting. So, and he hasn't seen the painting because he doesn't go there. So he decides he's going to go and destroy the painting, and that way no one will have any record of. So he goes up to the attic with his knife, which I think he used to kill somebody, whatever it is. He goes and he looks at the painting, this grotesque human being, which was him, but it was all transferred to the painting. And he rips it into pieces, and unfortunately what happens is he's ripping into himself. So the end of the story is they find him in the attic dead with a knife inside him and a painting of a beautiful Dorian Gray. That's the story. It's a powerful way of depicting this duplicity I'm talking about. Now, many people would love to have that deal. Hey, if I can look good, no one will know. Who cares? So there's a painting somewhere. But that's a perfect example, obviously an extreme, of this outer and inner dichotomy. And there is that possibility, because that's the world in which we live. It's exactly the way God planned it. He put us into an external world where we can deceive ourselves and deceive others into thinking that the outer matters and the inner doesn't. But the truth is, it's not at all true. And that's why in Hebrew, the word for panim is telling you the true meaning. Outer and inner are really one. And inner beauty will express itself on the outer level. So Judaism doesn't say, hey, just escape into the inner and forget about that. No. Bring that inner beauty into this world and make what we call a dir b'tachteinim, a dwelling place for the divine in this world. Make everything divine. Let everything be beautiful, physically beautiful, because it's an expression of internal beauty. In Hasidic thought, it says, there's a Talmud that says that God created women to be particularly beautiful. And you see, especially in the eyes of men. Okay, there's different levels of beauty. But there's something about the physical beauty of a woman that a man's attracted to. And I'm not speaking on any necessarily inappropriate way. Just the fact there's a physical beauty. I mentioned earlier, women for some reason are not attracted quite to the visual as much as men are. I mean, to use a disgusting statistic, that 99% of porn is watched by men. Not because women don't have a need for sexuality or intimacy, but their intimacy is far different, whether it's more of a state of being instead of an act, whether it's more trust and love as a nurturing as opposed to a short, quick fix of a visual. I'm not going to go into all the theories. But the interesting thing is, here's what it says. Like I mentioned before with the matriarchs, that they were physically beautiful. So it's a maqsadik. A few Chassidic Rebbes explain, why is that beauty? Because women come from Malchus. Malchus is the spiritual sphere that is associated with Tiferes. It's in the middle path. And because they come from Malchus, Malchus means kingship, queens. It's because they come from spiritual beauty, that's why they're physically beauty. But what does the world do with it? We turn it into a commodity. We turn it into something we sell. And we divorce it. It has nothing to do with values, it has nothing to do with anything inside. Because we have that capacity to separate the inner from the outer. So how does a godly person look at beauty? External beauty. They'll say, wow, look at the beauty of the divine, that it manifests itself in the beautiful person. And the Talmud, you actually have this. You have that there was a great sage, that everybody was drawn to his face because he was so beautiful, to the point that the daughter of the Roman cruel king, if you read the Hasari Harugi Malchus, I don't want to describe here the graphic events that happened there, but there was, who is it that the face? Rabbi Yeshua, is it Hanania ben Tarjan? Who is it that she wanted? Anyway, so he had this gorgeous, beautiful face, and if you asked people why, many people say, okay, he's a handsome guy, whatever, he does exercise, he eats right, I don't know what it is. But if you ask people who really knew him, it's because Chachmas Adam Ter Panav. He was a wise person, he was a godly person, he was a divine person, so his face shined with a certain, the word I want to use, a certain aesthetic beauty. But it was coming from an inner place. Anyway, the daughter of the Roman emperor at the time decided she wants him. He was very desirable to her. And of course he rejected her, so she convinced her father to kill him. And what she asked was to give me his face. So I'm not going to go say all the details. She wanted that. That's another example. Like the face is what matters. It's the person behind the face. Yes, a beautiful face, great, but there's a person there. You know, Lenin, there's the Lenin's mausoleum, so they stuffed him up with spices and all that, and you can still see him. He's still alive. But he's not alive. This is called the artificial, is trying to immortalize something that's false. Upon him, a face, if you think about it, when they say the eyes are the window to the soul, a face, in a way, expresses a person more than anywhere else. You look at someone's face, especially if you're a sensitive person who knows how to read a face, you can see a lot about a personality in a face. You can see it in the sparkle of the eyes. You could see it even if a person feels despondent. If you look at someone's hands, you're not going to see it. If you look at their chest, you're not going to see it. If you look at their elbows, you're not going to see it. A face has something about it that reflects something about the inside of us. Whether it's, as I said, whether it's the eyes, whether it's the complexion, whether it's the features, whether it's even a slight smile. I mean, look when you have eye-to-eye contact with someone. You can learn a lot about how they are reacting to you. Now, of course, we know there are poker faces and there are people who have learned to master the art of just completely concealing. But if you don't have anyone trying to hide anything, a face is very telling. And the way the Kabbalists and the Hasidic masters explain, because a face is reflective of your being. Now, if someone says something that's disturbing, again, unless you're hiding something, your face is going to show it. Someone says to you that something that's appealing or complimentary, your face will glow. Rabbi Yehuda was walking once into a town, into a city. His face was glowing. So the townspeople, the Gentiles in the town, who were peasants, simple people, began to speculate, why is this man glowing? So one guy said he must have eaten a good piece of pork. So he really after a good, nice, solid meal. Another one said he must have lent money to, must have borrowed money to someone on high interest. So he has like the pleasure of making a good business killing. And a third one said, well, I don't want to say what he said, but he said he must have had some nice sexual experience. So each one of them was saying what would make their faces glow, obviously. They were talking about themselves. And they went over to him, they said, Rabbi Yehuda, why is your face glowing? So he says, because I just discovered a new manuscript. And there's an expression, Tesefta Atikta. A new manuscript, but it was an ancient manuscript, but new to me. And it says, Chachmas Adam Teraparim, the wisdom of a person glows. So a wise person, when they find some new wisdom, they glow. So it's interesting. Everybody chooses to define what glowing is based on their own terms. So getting back to our theme here, outer beauty, when it says, I go back to the Eishes Chayil, and I'll tell the story with the Rebbe. The Rebbe was a former beauty queen from Israel, went by the Rebbe for dollars. And she says in Hebrew, I was a former beauty queen, and now I'm looking for a shidduch, I want to get married. And yeah, she was physically beautiful, and the Rebbe gives her a bracha, and then and gives her an extra $1. And then, which is very common, she's about to walk away, the Rebbe calls her back. And this is what he tells her. Listen to this. It's completely unexpected. You never expect the Rebbe to say this. He says, when we say in Eishes Chayil, Sheker Achein vehevel hayefi, that grace is false and beauty is vain, or I would say hevel, vain or hollow, empty. It doesn't mean, and Ke'im Yisha Yiras Hashem Hitasal, that the main thing is that rather praise a woman for her fear of God. It doesn't mean that it's false and vain. It means on its own it's false and vain. If it has nothing else, then it's just a shell. Then it's just an outside thing. But when you have the Yiras Hashem, when you have the inner beauty, then it's not sheker and hevel at all. It's very real. That's what the Rebbe said. Basically what I'm discussing here. So in that sense, the outer dimension of somebody, when it's reflective of that, is a unbelievable expression. Because it's not just that your beauty is within, but it's also reflective in your outer behavior and even your outer looks. And I say behavior because a refined person will behave in a refined way. Now, yes, many people can have great etiquette and they're not refined at all. But a refined person will also have refined etiquette. The way they talk, the way they walk, the way they communicate, how pleasantness, and so on. Because outer and inner are connected. So which brings me back to the biggest question of all, not quickest question, the biggest statement of all. When we know fashion and style is very big in society today. Fashions come out of different houses in Italy and France. And everybody feels that, if I dress the latest style, I'm like cutting edge, ahead of the curve, out of the box. But let's ask a question exactly. You out of the box, or you're just simply choosing from the few of the fashions that someone else decided is the fashion for the season? And then whatever their motives were, whether could be even a very financial motive, because if they sell you the same garment from last year, they're not going to make any money. Like eyeglasses. I wear eyeglasses, and then for some years it's big, and then it's small, and then it's plastic, and then they make another shift. And it never goes back to the original, because then people would just hold on to that. Is that really a style, and is that like some type of spiritual statement, or is it just simply a nice commercial way of... Now, I understand people like change, and we don't like to go to the same restaurant every day, so we're not going to wear the same clothing. And I'm not suggesting it isn't beautiful garments. Some of these stylists and fashion designers are brilliant. But what really lies behind this? Is this let's call it, is this how we become free-spirited individualists? Or is it just conformity at the end of the day? But conformity, that's classy. Classic conformity, wearing the latest. Now, obviously, you don't want to stand out and wear a suit that's outdated, or drive a car, and so on. I mean, there is a point of, what do they call them? Classics or antiques or vintage. It's another word. But still, most people... So I always wonder about this. I say, okay, I think external beauty and fashion style is great, but I don't know how much it really empowers people to be individualists. Let's put it this way. Because I think a person who's truly individualistic it's not depending on what you wear. It depends on who you are. You could be the biggest conformist, even though every day you're wearing another beautiful, latest fashion. It means nothing. And you could be a complete pioneer and genius, even if you're wearing clothing from 40 years ago. Now, I'm not suggesting one or the other. That's why I said inner and outer. But interestingly, from a Torah point of view, it would say the following. Who's controlling whom? Is the outer telling the inner what to do, or is the inner telling the outer what to do? That's what I would wonder. So I know we go shopping, and we have many choices, and someone says, this is my taste. This expresses who I am. Really? And what happens if the stylist didn't give you that option? What would you do then? You didn't create this garment. Very few people actually fashion their own garments. I mean, you may have that, but it's really a rarity. Now, I'm not criticizing. Obviously, we live in a world. We're not going to go start creating and fashioning our own designs. So we're given a lot of diversity. And I do think a person gravitates to something. It may be more you. That color fits you. It's, the shape or whatever it is an expression that you find appealing. You find that's the way you want to project. But we should not be deceived, just like I always talk about technology. Don't think just because you have all the technology in the world means that you're a connected person. It means that you have a good tool chest. And just because you have ways to communicate with everyone doesn't mean you're a good communicator. And just because we have all this technology doesn't mean you have good relationships. As we know, it means nothing. Relationships and inner connections have nothing to do with outer technologies. If you're a good communicator, technology will help you communicate better. And the same thing is with our choices in fashion and style. It's not what you choose that defines your individuality. It's who you are that defines your individuality. And then your personal choice can be an expression of that. And that's why we titled this, How Your Personal Style Can Be Spiritually Empowering. But only on one condition, that it's coming from within. Now imagine if you really were able to be in touch with who you are. Not what you do, who you are. You know, we always talk about who are you, and people give you their business card, who you are. And then go shopping, and then make a fashion statement or a fashion choice or style, then we're talking. But unfortunately, we live in a world where most people have no clue who they are. So it brings me back to the Chelem classic story. The guy with a big identity crisis. He never knows who he is. He's always looking for his identity and elsewhere. Like maybe it's me, you. Maybe you're my identity. Maybe you're my identity. So one day he goes to the mikveh, to the bathhouse, and he's about to go get undressed and get into the water, and he realizes, his clothing was his only way of really identifying himself, because he doesn't know what's going on inside. I mean, it's somewhat humorous. He only knows himself by what he sees in the mirror. And he's now going to a bath, which is not going to have any clothing. How will he know who he is when he comes out of the water? How will he be able to find himself? That's the Chelem version of the story. So he has a great idea. He ties a little thread around and ties it around his toe. So that way when he comes out, he's going to look for the thread, and he'll know who he is. A little problem happens. The thread unties itself, attaches itself to someone else's toe. He comes out of the mikveh, water, he's starting to look, where's the thread? Here, then he sees the thread. And he goes over to that person and says, I know who you are, but who am I? This is the Chelem story. You got to take it with a little grain, obviously. The point, and it's not really so funny actually when you think about it, because it's true. A lot of people are like that way. Who am I? And we start saying, well, I like what that guy's like. Maybe that's me. I don't mean physically me, but that's who I want to be. And we never end up developing our own identity. Especially if you think about it growing up in a home of overbearing parents. Or parents who just in general were not really healthy role models, whatever reason. And they impose themselves on us. It's a very serious issue. You grow up and saying, who am I? Am I an extension of my father or my mother? Am I what they want me to be? Or am I who I am? And then you don't even know who that I is, because whenever you try to express your voice, you were silenced. So again, it starts with humor, but there's also very tragic consequences that can come out of this dichotomy. So that's why it's such a vital thing to begin from within. So as much as we talk the importance of externals, it doesn't mean the external begins there. It means that the external is part of your journey. And yes, you should be a beautiful person on the outside, and you should have beauty, and you should be blessed to find beautiful people in your life and marry a beautiful person and all that. But remember, beauty outside is simply the cover of the beauty within. So we value both, and we do not say one is more important than the other, but we say one is the cause of the other. That's the key. So we live our lives from the outside in, which means, how do we look at the world around us? We use our eyes, our ears, our taste, touch, and smell. We see somebody. You meet somebody. The first thing you're going to react to is their body, is their face, is their appearance, their body language. The physical. You start talking to them, you start realizing there's a personality inside. It's a very interesting person. We share ideas. You start seeing an emotional life they have, an intellectual life, a spiritual life. They have vision, they have values, and so on. And you really get to know somebody after a while. You meet them, so you see their face. That's just to distinguish who that is. But how do you look at them? You don't look at their face anymore. You know this person well. You're really speaking to the whole person. The first time, as I said, you start from the outside and you travel inward. Good friends, at the end of the day, obviously you also relate to the person because that's the only way you can identify them. How do you know it's this person, not another? But at the end of the day, I remember, to put it in more morbid terms, I guess, I remember the day my father passed away. It was Sunday, 12 years ago, coming up to the 12th yard site. And I remember, seeing him a moment before when he was alive, and then the moment after. And it was like, besides the shock of the whole, of death and all that, but it was like, I was thinking to myself, he's the same person, I'm holding his hand, the same face, the person I knew for my whole life, and here, he's physically no longer alive. His body is there, everything that I know, and you start saying, which is the part that you loved? Which is the part that you were connected with? The answer is really both. But if you really think about it, you were connected to that, not the body. You were connected to the person that you knew, to the intelligence, to the relationship, to the experiences. However, the way it works is that's in a shell called a body. And of course, you want both. That's a perfect example. Our bodies are sacred beings. Our body is not just some type of box we discard. That's why it's so sacred when a person, God forbid, passes away after 120 years, that you treat them with sanctity. You don't just say, the soul is sacred, and then you throw the body out. No. The body is also sacred, because as I said, the outer is sacred in Judaism. But it's seen as the container for the soul, or to use the language of Kabbalah, the keli for the or, the container for the light. Now someone will say, let's say the power of vision. What's more important, the power of vision or your physical eye? The answer is like this. A physical eye without the power of vision is meaningless. It's a corpse. However, what's a power of vision without an eye? You can't see. They join together, talk about harmony, in another harmony, where you can't even distinguish between the power of your sight and the eye. And the eye is a healthy eye is perfectly aligned and tailored to be able to see through an eye. If the eye was made up of the components that your ear was made up, it would not see. It has to have the translucence, the iris, the corona, the different components of an eye. And the same thing with all parts of the body. The container and the energy are it's not even like a garment to a body. They're so joined as one, you can't separate. Where's the power of vision end and where's the eye begin? And vice versa. But you always know that the inner is what drives the outer. You have the eye, you don't have the power of vision, you don't have the soul, you don't have the spirit, you don't have the energy. It would be like having a light bulb without electricity. But they come together. So in a sense, when we look at everybody else around us, we travel from the outside in, as I said. You see they're outside, and hopefully you begin to develop an inner relationship. But the outside also matters. When we look at ourselves, interestingly, we don't think from the outside. You don't need to look in the mirror to know you exist. You feel yourself from the inside. And then you manifest on the outside. You feel happy inside. That's when you smile. You don't first smile and then feel happy. So interestingly, this inner-outer relationship goes both ways. With yourself, you're traveling from the inside out. But unfortunately, what happens is we begin to conform to society's standards where you live outside lives and the inner becomes not significant. You start seeing people don't value what you feel or think. They value what you produce. So you become a producer. You want to please. They say that I'm not paying you for your feelings. I'm paying you for your production. For just use that expression. And what happens is you start becoming a superficial person. You start becoming what people want from you, what people value in you, Oh, you find me appealing because I speak well? Okay, so I'll speak well. You find me appealing because I dress well or I look good? Because that's what I'll do. And what happens is your outer life suddenly becomes the dominant. And what should happen is that the outer should be beautiful, but it should be an expression from within. So we have two choices. Yeah, you can choose style and fashion, and it's an expression. You can consider yourself, you can convince yourself that it's an expression of your inner thing. But if you don't have an inner self, it's very difficult to say that it's an expression of your inner self. Like someone say, okay, tell me, you're dressed a certain way. Can you tell me how that expresses your inner self? You know, most people will not really find an answer. I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, because the fact of the matter is we become more external in that sense. So, the bottom line is you do have the power to express yourself and sometimes make a statement, but that comes from within. It doesn't have to be necessarily in a dramatic way. It doesn't have to be in a crazy way. Today, every time a celebrity gets on television, they dress a certain way, or they get up at a rally, or they receive an Oscar, or present, etc. All the tabloids, and I don't know how many gossip magazines are there in the United States. What would you say? Plenty. Everybody's analyzing, not just who's the best dressed and how they dressed and what they expressed or didn't express. And there's a certain side, every voyeuristic society has a certain appeal. I can't say I really enjoy reading this stuff, but I've seen enough. And I always say to myself, and not because I'm looking here for spiritual content, but even on a basic level, come on, who are you kidding here? What kind of BS is all this? What expression? What are they expressing exactly? Oh, she wore a color, so maybe she's representing that she's anti-Trump or something like that. What was it at the inauguration? Melania wears some color. It was like some type of official statement of her individuality, that she's really not agreeing with her husband. Now, I don't know if it's true. It's not true, and frankly, who cares? But that's the entertaining society, and that's what you want to see. Beautiful women. She's beautiful, What do they have? Entertainment Tonight. What do they have, those two? Entertainment Tonight. What does the other one have? Entertainment Tonight and, like 7 o'clock. Those two shows on NBC, and I don't know. I watch it sometimes because it just reminds me. I feel, if in case sometimes I'm a little down, I want to feel a little superior. I watch these shows and I feel, hey, okay, I'm not on that level at least, thank God. But there's a certain, I understand the appeal to it. It's like, it keeps you busy, and it's a very low common denominator, and it really appeals completely to your senses, and that's it. And there's nothing inner at all, And they're not going to invite me to speak about the inner on those shows. That I know, for sure, right? Nor will they do that in sports talk either, talk radio. So the only place I have this venue where we have right here, where the networks don't control what I have to say, and I'll say what I want to say and not conform to anybody's standards. And you know what? I'm using YouTube and Facebook to get the message out there. So that's my voice of defiance and my expression. I remember years ago in one of the classes, so a young guy came to the class and said to me, why do you wear, this like Hasidim wear black and white or whatever the garments we wear? And I wasn't going to ask him, why do you wear what you wear, as if he has an explanation, But, okay, fine, stands out. A lot of people wear the same thing. So I gave him the answer. I said, listen, do you ever ask an astronaut why they wear the garments they wear? No, why? Because they're on a mission. Those garments are going to save their lives. That's the garments you need. He actually loved the answer. I said, if you think of your life in a mission, there are certain garments. Now, you could ask me why black and white. I can give you explanations. The point of the matter is, I'm the first to admit that most people dress, whether it's in the religious world or non-religious world, is more conformist than individual spiritual astronauts. I wish it was that way. Most people dress, that's the way they grew up, and that's what they're comfortable with. And that's their statement. It's like the uniform in school. Or, and listen, sports people wear the uniforms of their team. Yeah, but they're getting paid, whatever, a few $1 million a year to do that. So they don't mind to look like clowns, during a game. And then afterwards they put on their regular clothing. But I'm not going to go now into a whole commentary on the fashion industry and clothing. I just wanted to point out the fact is this. You control your destiny. You control your individuality. I'm not suggesting that anybody tomorrow morning go out in the street and go to work and say, hey, I heard Rabbi Jacobson class last night, and here's how I'm dressing. This is me. And looking like some type of, I don't know, peacock or some weird thing. I don't want to be sued, and I don't want to be blamed for that type of behavior. However, I think on a more however, on a more serious note, on a more subtle level, the goal here is really to get control of your life. You have to be you, and frankly, it doesn't really matter what others really think. It's true that we live in a society we want to be accepted, and nothing wrong with that. But the point of my whole entire discussion here is to tell us that you have tremendous inner beauty, every one of us, and never underestimate that. Doesn't matter what others think. You have to find people that reinforce that affirm that, and that value you that way. And by all means, let that be the driving force to express itself in a physical way. Be physically beauty, dress beautifully, behave beautifully. But remember, the goal here is to find that voice. You find that, everything else will follow. And I guarantee you that, yes, your clothing and dress and even personal style choices will be an expression of that spiritual empowerment. So, my friends, that's the commentary for this week's Wednesday Night Live. Simon Jacobson here, as I said, using all the channels. And until next Wednesday, everyone have a very beautiful inner and outer week. In any way we could help, Meaningful Life Center, myself, never hesitate to reach to us. Okay? I include you. And everybody else, everybody everywhere. And have a pleasant week. Be well. Thank you. Thank you.